Today I thought it'd be fun to do something a little different. We haven't actually touched on the Punisher in a while, have we? And if you watched the Defenders trailer at San Diego Comic-Con, then you saw that he's going to be included very soon. It's time to touch on the Punisher from All New, All Different Marvel Volume 1. You know, when he takes down an entire drug ring. Our story begins in the warehouse district of Brooklyn as Olaf receives orders from his contact Face. Since the DEA has been poking around in their business, they need to get ready to move their shipment of EMC first thing tomorrow. But one warehouse over, DEA agents Ortiz and Henderson watch, and as Face leaves, Henderson says they got the drugs, got the organization, and now they have Face. Is everything good? Ortiz snaps one last picture and she says, hell yeah, they're good. As the two agents head back inside to prepare for the upcoming bust, they discuss their next move. All the while, Frank Castle sits in the shadows listening. The next morning, Olaf cleans his gun, watching over the operations when there's a sudden loud explosion going off in the warehouse. Some of the men ask, who the hell is that? And Olaf looks up at the monitors and sees Frank and he sighs, oh, f me, it's Frank. The guards shout over the intercoms to kill him, and Olaf tells him, that's the thing, you can't kill Frank Castle. He's already dead. Down in the warehouse, Frank unloads his rifle into the drug handlers, killing everyone in sight. One of the handlers grabs a package of EMC and begins to break it open, shoving his face into the drug. One of the other handlers asks, how you feeling? And the first tells him, oh yeah, I'm really feeling it now. The man then runs at Frank and flips a table over on top of him. As the man gets close and grabs Frank, Frank grabs his pistol and shoots the man in the chest, but the man doesn't stop. He throws Frank into a wall. Back up in the control room, the two guards ask, what are we supposed to do now? Our operation here is screwed, and now we got this monster running around. Olaf loads his gun, saying, Frank isn't a monster. Hell, back in the day, I used to be the commanding officer of Frank. The problem is that what we're looking at down there isn't Frank, that's the Punisher. And there ain't no talking to the Punisher. The guard then asks, so what are we supposed to do? And Olaf shoots the man and he says, we ain't doing nothing. And then he leaves, leaving behind a folder. Down in the warehouse, the drug man begins to beat into Frank, shouting, check it out! I'm gonna be the one to take out the Punisher! And Frank reaches up, gouging out the man's eyes with his thumbs. And as the man stumbles back, he shouts, I don't even need eyes! I can smell you out! Frank gets up grabbing a metal pole and he stabs it into the man. And then he takes a cinder block and he hammers it through the man into a power box. The drugged up man is electrocuted and the second man runs after Frank. But without even breaking motion, Frank spins around, hitting him with the cinder block. Just as Frank gets ready to crush the man's head, the man is shot in the back of the head, and Frank hears Olaf's voice telling him, long time no see. Frank doesn't respond, and Olaf says, I don't want to kill you, but I know I can. But these guys, they're just assholes who'd been treating you like crap for years. In fact, I left you a little present upstairs in a green folder. It's full of information about this and every other Condor operation. As Olaf steps back into the shadows, he tells Frank, don't follow. You of all people know a good Marine always has a fail-safe extraction. Semper Fi, Frank. Later, as the sun begins to rise, agents Ortiz and Henderson move into position for their bust, and as they head inside, they see everyone's already been killed. Henderson asks what happened, a rival drug interest, and Ortiz looks at the shell casings on the floor and tells him, no, this was the work of one man, maybe two, and I'm thinking of the person who could have done this. Our carefully constructed case on Condor is gone. Elsewhere, Face sits in a safe house telling their boss that it's confirmed. The man who hit them was the Punisher. The man on the phone asks if he made it out alive, and Face tells him, it's uncertain but highly doubtful. The man on the phone says they need to make sure they hit the street date for EMC because if not, they're gonna have some very bad men upset. So the Frank Castle problem needs to be dealt with and fast. So is there any chance that their overworked workforce can handle that? Face finishes nailing in the last nail on a board and he says that he's just about to hang up another face on his collection. He says that he's sure he can find some space to fit him in. Frank follows the trail that Olaf left behind, and Face heads over to the next drop to supply their buyers with the drugs. The buyer tells Face what the hell are they supposed to do now? The DEA is all over them. Are they gonna find out about this? And Face tells him not to worry, he's not a slob. Plus, he comes bearing gifts. He tosses a wrapped package onto the table and he tells the buyers that once one of their guys gets a taste for this stuff, they'll be begging for more. This drug will make even the weakest little gangbanger into the biggest threat for their competition. As the deal goes on, the officer rolls up on a drop. And he gets out to tell Face that he's sorry for being late, but where's Johnson? Face says that he's not here, and the officer grabs his gun stating, "Not good." But before he can say another word, there's a shot in his head. Suddenly another officer is shot and each of the buyers begins to shoot. The last buyer calls out Face and he hears a voice telling him to spill it. He turns around and Frank grabs him by the throat. And the buyer says, "I don't know very much. All I know is that there's a cooker in Vermont. He does a small batch for..." But before the buyer can finish, he's shot through the eye and Face says, "That guy talked too much." Frank grabs the buyer's body and uses it as a shield, and then he shoots the gun out of Face's hand. Face pulls out a small amount of EMC, and he says, "So that's how you want to play, huh?" And he snorts it. Face looks back up with his eyes turning red and he shouts, "That's the stuff! Game time!" Face begins to charge at Frank, and Frank fires at him. Face weaves through the shots and he hits Frank, telling him that this drug gives him moves he ain't ever seen before. The two start punching into each other, and then Face headbutts Frank to his knees. When Frank turns back, he sees Face driving off, and he looks back up at the cop. The officers radio in, telling all units that they have an APB on a man named Frank Castle. Yes, that Frank Castle. He should be considered armed and very dangerous, obviously. Meanwhile, over in Vermont, the cooker, Josiah, received word that Frank was most likely on his way to their location, so they need to get things ready for him. After telling his men what needs to be done, the man calls his daughter Junie in, telling her not to be shy. They need to get a good look at her. Junie steps out wearing a vest strapped with explosives, and Josiah tells her that she looks beautiful. Is she ready to make her daddy proud? The next day, Frank heads over to Josiah's compound and begins scouting the area. A little while later, one of the guards laughs at another, saying that the guy thinks that he can take them out on their turf. Ha! He's got another thing coming. One of the scouts calls out that there's a van coming, the battle van. And soon Frank's battle van begins to roll into the compound. The guards watch, and Josiah shouts out, "What are you waiting for? Blow that thing up!" The guards unload into the battle van until it stops, and then one goes to check it out, and he's shot in the head. More shots begin going off, hitting some of the other guards, and the remaining go back to firing at the van. Frank lays down underneath it and begins to shoot at the legs of the men, and then he shoots them in the head as they fall. The remaining guards lay on the ground when his radio goes off, asking if they've got him yet. The man looks up and he sees Frank, begging him not to do it. "Don't kill him!" And Frank grabs the radio, telling Josiah, "You're next." And then he hears a single gunshot. Josiah jumps up, throwing his radio against the wall, and he asks his daughter if she's ready to make Daddy proud. A few moments later, Junie walks outside with her T-Rex toy, nervously singing to herself as she sees the dead bodies scattered all around. She then sees something thrown by her and bounce past her, and it begins to release smoke. She calls out to her dad, and Josiah tells her to remember what he said. Just keep walking until she reaches the van. As Josiah starts to look around, he feels a knife pressed to his neck, and then he hears Frank whisper something. Josiah calls out to Junie, telling her to just stay where she's at. And then Frank asks, "Where can I find Face?" Josiah tells him Exeter Asylum. They have a lab there, center of the whole EMC operation, but he'll be ready. "So what now then? Are you gonna kill me in front of my little girl?" Frank tells him, "No, she won't see a thing." And then the smoke completely covers them. A few moments later, Frank walks out of it and he tells Junie, "It's okay, it's all over now, and we're gonna go on a trip." Junie asks if her dad's coming, and Frank says, "Nope, Daddy is staying put." After getting the explosive vest off of her, Frank starts to drive Junie away from the compound as she sings with her toy, and she asks Frank if he likes dinosaurs. He tells her sure, and Junie then says that she does too. But it's sad since they're all dead. But if they were alive, then they would be all dead. Suddenly there's a honk coming from behind the van, and Frank looks back to see a speeding truck heading their way. And in the driver's seat is Face, shouting that this time he's prepared. "You're dead now, Frank!" Face starts pulling up next to the van, and the gunners begin to open fire on Frank. As the bullets bounce off the window, Frank rams the van into Face's truck, causing one of the gunners to fall out. From the back of Face's truck, one man rides a bike out and he quickly spins it around, chasing after. Frank hits the switch to drop the spikes, and as the bike rolls over them, the thug jumps onto the back of the van. The thug opens up the back door to get inside, and then he starts looking at all of the guns mounted along the wall. Junie shouts, "The man is taking your guns!" The thug then pulls out a gun and aims it at Frank, and Frank tells him to watch his feet. Suddenly, the floorboard slides out from under his feet, and he falls out, getting run over by Face. While the other gunners continue to fire at Frank, Ortiz and Henderson fly up behind them somehow. Face looks back and tells everyone that they're staying on course. It's open season on the DEA! Ortiz grabs a rifle and starts shooting down at Face's truck, and after hitting one of the thugs, Face leans out, firing back, hitting the pilot. The helicopter violently shifts, causing Henderson to fall out, but rather than hitting the ground, he lands on top of Face's truck. The thugs begin to pull Henderson into the cab, and Face tells everyone that they're going to be keeping this one. Up ahead, Junie points to the cops blocking the road, asking if those are more bad guys. Frank tells her, "No, but they're not exactly my friends. It's a bit complicated." He tosses the explosive vest out of the window, and as he gets closer to the roadblock, he sets it off and speeds by. As Face gets up from the explosion, the cops surround him, telling him to freeze. One of the officers shouts that he's gonna need backup, and Face tells him, "Yeah, you will!" And then he shoots everyone. Elsewhere, EMTs arrive to treat Ortiz from the crash of the helicopter when an officer pulls up with Junie. The officer tells Ortiz that they tried to follow Frank, but Frank left this girl at a gas station after buying her some ice cream. Ortiz runs to Junie asking if Frank said anything about where he was going, and Junie says she doesn't know. Ortiz then shouts asking, "Where did they take Henderson?" And Junie yells, "I don't know! All I know is that Frank said it's complicated." The officer pulls Junie away, telling her it's okay. Ortiz is just having a bad day. Everything is all right. And Ortiz walks away from the fire asking, "Does any of this look all right?" Over at the Exeter Asylum, Face looks at the wall of his skinned face and saying, "Man, I'm in for a treat today." And Henderson groans asking, "What, are you gonna kill me now?" And Face pulls out his knife, telling him, "Oh no." Elsewhere in the facility, a guard begins to make her rounds when she suddenly steps in blood. She grabs a radio, calling out that they have a breach in the... But before she can finish, she is shot. And Frank continues on. Back with Face, the doctor to the facility talks into a pair of gas masks, asking, "Do I really have to do it now?" And Face tells her, "I'm just finishing. What's going on?" The doctor tosses the mask, saying that he led Punisher here, and now everything is screwed, plus the DEA is just behind him. The doctor then begins putting the drug into the vents, and Face tells her, "I know, the DEA is close, which is why I made a little surprise for them." Elsewhere in the facility, Ortiz moves in, and when she looks at the wall, she sees Henderson's skinned face, and a note that says, "For Ortiz." Just as she's about to fall apart, the fumes from the drug begin to creep into the vents, and Frank tosses her a gas mask, telling her to hurry up. She shouts that he can go to hell! How did you know that they were gonna put it in the vents anyway? And Frank tells her, "Because that's what I would have done." Now don't look away from that face. Remember this feeling, that anger. It's gonna make you stronger. Ortiz pulls her gun on Frank, telling him that they're gonna have to get one thing straight. She fires, hitting a thug in the head, and continues stating, "In here we work together. Out there though," Frank tells her, "Deal," and he cocks his gun. The two make their way through the halls, and Ortiz says that it's probably time that they split up to cover more ground. A short while later, Ortiz spots Face and the doctor and shouts at them not to move. Face laughs, telling her, "What? Don't you want to see Henderson?" Suddenly, the doors begin to open next to Ortiz, and Henderson shuffles out, high on EMC. Face laughs, saying that he knows that they have a lot to catch up on. But before he leaves, Ortiz shoots him in the wrist and then the filter off of his gas mask. Henderson reaches out, grabbing Ortiz by the neck, and begins to squeeze, and Ortiz screams for him to stop. As Henderson lifts her up, Ortiz tells her, "Please don't make her," and she holds the gun to the side of Henderson's head and pulls the trigger. Over in the morgue, the doctor grabs her gun and she hears the gunshots getting closer and gets ready to escape when Frank kicks in the door. The doctor aims her gun and Frank tells her, "Go on, I dare you." The doctor pulls the trigger and the barrel explodes, firing back, hitting her in the eye. Frank looks down and says, "The barrel was jammed." Let me take a wild guess. Olaf gave you that gun? With friends like him, huh? And then he shoots. Elsewhere, Olaf and the boss watch the footage from over at Exeter Asylum, and Olaf says that it's time to push the button and get out. The boss pulls out a pill and says, "It's fine. We got what we needed." Back at the facility, Frank heads down the passageway the doctor was trying to escape in and finds an underground sewer system. As Frank walks through, he finds inmates that were used as test subjects, and they all begin to attack. He fights back, pulling out his RPG, and then he pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. He pulls another test subject back and hits the canister, and then the rocket goes off. Frank jumps down to shield himself from the blast with the water, but back on the surface, the building begins to shake. Ortiz manages to get out, and that's when she hears the rumbling, and the explosion from the RPG blows a hole in the side of the building and throws Ortiz down to the ground. Back with Olaf, he says that it's a shame to lose the asylum. It was a real asset. The boss then says they have others. The DEA's trail is gonna go cold, and they got rid of that liability Face. So cheers to that. A few days later, Ortiz heads back to the office to help clean out Anderson's desk. And as she does, she looks at the board that him and her put together on Contour. Ortiz then hears a voice telling her, "It wasn't your fault, you know." And then the DEA chief walks in. He tells her it's probably best for her to step away from the case. She's gotten too close, and Ortiz stops him, telling him, "Yeah, she is close. Closer than she's ever been." The chief shouts, "No. After the mess that you just got us in, I'm taking you off of this case, and I'm not asking." Ortiz shouts to give her one more week, and the chief puts his hand on her shoulder, telling her, "I want your badge and your gun by the end of the day. Just walk away from this while you still can walk." Ortiz looks back at the board, stating that she's connected all of the dots, but she's missing something. Something hiding in plain sight. But now it's buried beneath the rubble of the Exeter Asylum. Frank Castle. A while back, in Frank's Marine days, him, Olaf, and O'Neill were positioned out in the desert. But that mission was so important that there was a mercenary group known as Condor that was called in to provide assistance. All of the Marines hated the idea, but the commanding officer told them that they didn't have a choice. As the unit continued their operation and snuck into the compound to assassinate their target, they found a child. Frank told them that they were not killing the child. A gun goes off and O'Neill is shot in the neck, and as the boy looks at the gun, the mercenaries open fire and kill the boy. With no choice but to move on, Frank and the others press onto the target and they kill him. As everyone turns to leave, the mother of the boy finds her son and grabs the rifle next to his body. Frank tried to talk the woman down and Olaf shot her, and Frank asked, "What the hell are you doing?" Olaf asked him if he's going to live his life taking orders or actually maybe do something like these mercenaries. Frank walked off, and as the mercenaries got ready to torch the building, one mentions to Olaf that Condor always takes care of its own, and they're always looking for a few good men. Back in the present, Ortiz stands by the graveyard of the Exeter Asylum in the rain, looking at a picture of her and Henderson. After wiping away her tears, she pulls out a pack of bullets and sets it on the gravestone, telling Frank that everyone says that he must have died in the tunnel explosion. If he's out there, if he's still alive. But before finishing, Ortiz trails off and leaves the bullets there. As she leaves, she begins to think about how now she's starting to get it. In this cruel and violent world, how could they have possibly been surprised that the Punisher was born? In that moment, lightning strikes and a hand shoots out of the grave. And as it claws its way out, Frank pulls his head out of the ground, gasping for air. And that was The Punisher, Volume 1 from All New, All Different Marvel. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The Punisher has always been a character that I have truly enjoyed within Marvel, and luckily they have yet to really tweak with him. He just goes in and he kills people. Now don't forget to check out our other Punisher videos right here, and you can check out more Marvel right here. And somewhere around here, as usual, is our subscription button. I will see you guys next time right here at Comicstorian.